A shy girl, hiding her entire world in poetry. A forgotten notebook, and a stranger who found it. He didn't return it. Just left a message that made her tremble. From then on, they wrote to each other. No names, no faces, only raw, aching truths. Because sometimes the one who understands you best is the one who's never known your name. Have you ever bared your heart with nothing but a few lines on a page? As the morning light filtered softly through the frosted windows of the university library, Olivia walked slowly down the empty hallway, her small backpack swaying gently behind her. No one noticed her, and that, more than anything, brought her peace. Her footsteps moved to their own rhythm, unhurried, inconspicuous. Just another senior literature major, hair pulled back neatly, eyes always skimming away from contact. Olivia didn't speak much, but inside her lived an ocean of untouched feeling. She wasn't good at telling stories, not out loud, but when she wrote, the words came easily. Tucked in the canvas tote she carried every day was a small notebook, its faded indigo cover worn at the corners. That was where she kept the things she'd never said aloud. Every morning she followed the same ritual, a hidden desk on the second floor, by the window, where the light was soft enough not to glare on the page. Olivia didn't write for anyone else. Her poems were whispered fragments, pieced together from honest feeling, nameless loneliness, unspoken dreams, a love without shape or name. This morning, like always, she took out the notebook and opened to a fresh page. The nib of her fountain pen kissed the thin paper, deep violet ink bleeding gently into the lines, soft as breath. The poem wasn't long, just a few lines as usual, but she spent more than an hour on it, shaping each stroke with care. I won't ask your name, just let me know. Once, I was a quiet place in your thoughts. When she finished, Olivia exhaled, a soft, emptying feeling. She smoothed her hand over the page and closed her eyes, as if the emotion that had passed through her fingers still lingered in the air. The library was growing busier, the faint squeak of rubber soles on tile, pages turning, keys tapping. Olivia checked the time. Class in 10 minutes. She closed the notebook, tucked it into a stack of books and rushed off, not noticing the moment it slipped free and landed quietly on the table. It stayed there, waiting. That afternoon, as the sunlight turned honeyed and low, Noah stepped into the library. A third-year student with rolled-up sleeves, wire-rimmed glasses, and a pace that suggested he had all the time in the world. He often came here to think, to write, to breathe in the hush of old books and soft light. He made his way to his usual table, the one no one ever seemed to take, and saw it, a small notebook slightly askew. No name, no identifying mark, just a worn indigo cloth cover, dulled with age. Noah picked it up, intending to bring it to Lost and Found, but his hand paused when his fingers brushed the paper's edge. Curiosity. A page turned almost, without thought, and the first lines met him like a breeze he hadn't expected. I'm not afraid of being alone, only of the silence, where no one reaches in. The words were unadorned, unassuming, yet something in the way they stood together made him still inside. It wasn't skill, it was truth, so sharp and bare, it felt as though someone had written it about him. Another page as then another. Each poem a shard of something half-dreamed, half-remembered, a world someone had hidden inside a notebook, and now lay quietly open. Before him, Noah stopped reading. He set the notebook down, heart tangled between wonder and guilt. Then he reached into his bag, pulled out a small slip of paper and wrote, "Your poems feel like music no one sings, but I can still hear them. If you're still writing, please don't stop." He didn't sign it, left no trace. Just placed the note between the last few pages and returned the notebook as it was, as though he'd never touched it. But Noah knew he had stepped into something rare, something real, something unlike anything before. Olivia returned, that afternoon unsettled by something she couldn't name. It was only when she reached her usual spot and found her notebook missing from her bag that her heart clenched. She searched the room, breath quick, eyes darting. And then, She saw it, right where she'd left it. But different somehow. She opened it, and a slip of paper, light as a dragonfly wing, fell into her hand. She read the words in silence. Something strange and familiar swelled in her chest, like someone had touched the shell she'd spent years building. She read it again, then slowly closed the notebook. No one saw the small smile that passed over her lips, fleeting, soft, like the first blossom unfolding in shade. Evening settled like a sheer scarf over the library's hush. Outside, golden leaves drifted lazily down the worn stone steps, casting a quiet spell over a city slipping out of autumn. Inside, every sound was softened by silence, the turn of a page, the whisper of footsteps, an occasional cough that vanished almost as quickly as it came. No one looked too long. No one spoke much. This was a place for unfinished thoughts, for people searching for answers between the lines of old books. Noah moved slowly between the shelves, his eyes scanning titles without urgency. He wasn't searching for a particular book. He was searching for a spark. Whenever his writing stalled, he came here, walking the aisles, letting small, nameless details call out to him. His backpack slung over one shoulder, he stopped by his usual window seat on the second floor. The one he returned to whenever he needed solitude. But today, there was more than soft sunlight and the sigh of wind against the glass. A small notebook lay in the center of the table. Its indigo cloth cover bore a faint scratch, like the trace of time's fingertip. No name, no markings. Yet it didn't look like something carelessly left behind. It felt alive. Noah's hand hovered, his brow furrowed slightly. He meant to take it to lost and found, but something made him pause. Maybe instinct. Or maybe it was curiosity. He opened the notebook. The first page wasn't an introduction or a class note, it was a poem. Slanted handwriting, even and gentle, like wind brushing a curtain. One day I dreamed I was a cooling teacup by the window, waiting for someone. Not in a hurry, just to be held with both hands. Noah read slowly, word by word, as if walking barefoot through an unfamiliar place that somehow felt close. He stopped, inhaled deeply. Something in the verse stirred him, not because it was polished, but because it was true. Disarmingly true, painfully human. He turned the next page. I never ask about tomorrow. Only fear that today no one will ask about me. No signature, no preamble, but each poem, each quiet line felt like a voice trying to escape a sealed box. He could sense it clearly, someone's soul whispering to the world, hoping just once to be heard. And strangely, impossibly, he was. That someone, Noah pulled out a slip of paper and wrote, his pen steady, but his tone edged with reverence. He knew he was stepping into something deeply private. But he couldn't leave without answering. Your poems are a doorway into a silent world I've once walked through. Thank you for writing. If you're still writing, please don't stop. He tucked the note into one of the final pages. No name, no clue of who he was. He closed the notebook and placed it back carefully, exactly as he'd found it. But his heart refused to be closed again. Elsewhere on campus, Olivia moved quietly through the library halls, fingers clutching the strap of her tote. Her steps faltered each time a flicker of thought reminded her of the notebook. She checked her bag twice. Each time her heartbeat spiked. And each time, empty, the notebook, the one that held the most fragile parts of her, was gone. She couldn't recall exactly where she'd left it. Maybe in class, maybe here. But now, unease spread through her like ink-soaking paper. Impossible to take back. The poems inside weren't secrets, but they were real. They were her. And if someone read them, she climbed to the second floor, her pace quickening, drawn by something she couldn't explain. And then, like an unnamed miracle, she saw it. The notebook lay just where she had hoped it would, untouched, undisturbed. Olivia snatched it up, her hand resting on the cover as if to thank it for staying. But as she flipped through the pages, a small slip of paper fell gently into her palm. She froze. A line of handwriting, not hers. Thank you for writing. If you're still writing, Please don't stop. Olivia didn't move. Her heart hovered in the air, caught between disbelief and wonder. Someone had read her words. Someone had understood. And not judged. She read it again. Then again. In the hush of the library, her eyes shimmered, as if the universe had just whispered, "Someone heard you." A breeze brushed in through the open window. Her hair lifted slightly, and for the first time in a long while, Olivia smiled. A soft, quiet smile, enough to warm the edges of all the lonely years. No names had been exchanged, no faces seen. Only poetry, and a stranger, had opened a door in a heart that had long been locked. If a stranger has ever touched your soul through a single sentence, a passing glance, or a forgotten note, leave a comment below. Who knows? Someone might be waiting to read you. Late afternoon spilled across the library like a thin veil, tinting the leaves outside the second-floor window with a deep golden hue. Inside, where the light slanted softly across the room, Olivia sat motionless. The notebook lay open before her, and beside it, the same unfamiliar slip of paper, square and weightless, yet heavy as a heartbeat. No signature, no clue. Just a few quiet lines that reached deeper than any poem she'd ever written. "If you're still writing, please don't stop." She rested her hand on the words, as if trying to catch the echoes still lingering between the letters. There was warmth there, and fear, the kind you feel stepping barefoot into a sacred place, unsure if you belong. Someone had read her, and instead of turning away, they had answered, gently. Part of her wanted to tuck the notebook away for good, but the other part, the part that trembled and still longed for connection, had grown louder. She opened to a fresh page. Her hand shook slightly, but this time she wasn't writing for herself. She was writing for whoever waited on the other side of the paper. I don't know who you are, but if you saw yourself in my words, then maybe you've sat here too and felt the wind drift past just like I do now. She paused, then smiled. A quiet, private thing. For the first time, her poetry wasn't a whisper to herself alone. She kept writing, not rushed, not guarded. The ink flowed with ease, carrying something freer than before. At the end of the page, she added a small note, not quite a message, not quite a question. If you'd like to keep reading, I'll leave the notebook here every Tuesday afternoon. No name, no clue. Just a bridge she laid gently between two worlds. The writer and the reader, fear and trust. The next week, Noah returned, not sure if the invitation was real or if he had imagined it, but he came anyway. A quiet promise. To himself. At the same table, as if by some invisible agreement, the notebook was waiting. He opened it, heart quickening as though waking from a dream to find it had followed him into daylight. The response was there, poetry, yes, but also something more. A voice breathing, a presence. He didn't know who the writer was, but each line carried a rhythm that felt singular. Someone who saw the wind, who heard quiet, who felt what others left unspoken. He picked up his pen, this time no sticky note. He wrote straight into the notebook. You write as though you've lived 1,000 lives in silence in watching, and in all the things no one ever thought to ask you. He didn't write much, just enough to say what words couldn't fully hold. But enough for her to know he was listening. The following Tuesday, Olivia returned. Her steps were steadier now. Her eyes searched for the table without hesitation, and when she saw the notebook waiting exactly as promised, she knew he had come back. She opened it, read his words, and something in her chest tightened. Quietly, the way it does when you realize someone has seen through you, without ever seeing your face. So she kept writing. Week after week, the dialogue unfolded. Unbroken, unconditional. Neither of them knew who the other was, not really. Only what they chose to leave behind in ink. But in that anonymity, they were more honest than they'd ever been. More whole. One day, Olivia wrote, if we ever met, maybe the magic would slip away, so I don't wish to know who you are. Only that you'll always be the one who understands me, without needing to see me. Noah read that line and paused. He leaned back, eyes drifting upward toward the high library ceiling, where afternoon light shimmered through the leaves outside. And he realized He didn't feel like something was missing. In fact, he felt complete. There were no voices, no faces, just pages, ink, and two souls brushing gently against each other in the quietest place, where no hands reached, yet everything touched. The conversation had begun, and neither of them wanted it to end. The air had turned colder. Wind slipped through the library's old windows with a breath both gentle and sharp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves, aging paper, and something like memory. Autumn sunlight slanted across the dusty glass, casting trembling shadows of leaves onto the table where the notebook lay waiting, a quiet relic, a secret sanctuary shared by only two. Olivia arrived earlier than usual. Not because she had something to write, but because something inside her felt incomplete until she saw the notebook there. She couldn't name the feeling. It wasn't longing, not quite anticipation. It was quieter than that, but constant, like breath. She flipped through the recent pages. Their exchange, poetry passed hand to hand without faces or names, had settled into a steady rhythm, like a shared heartbeat between two strangers whose lives somehow beat in time. Once, Noah had written, "Maybe, in another world, we met before either of us knew how to be afraid." She hadn't answered directly, but left behind, "If I could live inside a single line, I'd choose the poem you haven't written yet." They never asked names, never shared dates or days, but the poems had begun to grow longer, more intimate, layered with pieces of memory. Each one peeled back a layer of who they were beneath their words. Today, Olivia brought something. She'd debated for days. A poem about her father, lost when she was still small, when not with clarity but with shadow. Images, a worn shirt by the door, shoes placed neatly side by side, a sadness that was never allowed to say its name. She wrote, "The day my father left, the wind was still, but something in me blew away. I learned silence before I ever learned to say I love you, Dad." She closed the notebook gently, not knowing that just hours later, Noah would arrive, and something in those lines would stir a memory he had long kept buried. He came to the library exhausted, a long class, an unfinished paper, that familiar sense of being adrift in the last months of college. But when he saw the notebook there, everything softened, like someone had held onto a part of him, kept it safe while the rest of the world moved on. He opened it, read the new poem. His hand stopped mid-turn. The words weren't just tender. They held something deeper, a quiet acknowledgement of grief, honest and raw. And suddenly, without warning, he was pulled back to the day his mother died. He was 14. He remembered her eyes the last time they looked at him. Warm, soft, without blame. Then gone, like the light going out in a room. He had written so much since then. Essays, stories, poems, but never about her, never about that. He'd thought he'd learned to live without touching the wound. But these words, from someone with no name, no face, cracked something. He sat for a long time, then wrote, not in verse, not with form, but with truth, unfiltered, unpolished. "I didn't cry at the funeral because I was afraid I wouldn't be able to stop. But reading your words, I cried, alone. Thank you for remembering what I couldn't." Days later, Olivia returned. When she read his reply, her hand paused. Her heart stuttered, not from surprise, but from something more hauntingly familiar. For the first time, he hadn't written in poetry. For the first time, he had let her see the wound directly, without metaphor, without distance. And because of that, he felt closer than ever. She touched the page. Her heart beat differently now. She wrote, "Sometimes I think grief chooses us like a bird choosing the weakest branch to land, because only there can it feel how much it's trembling. Still no names. Still strangers." But this was no longer a conversation. It was an embrace in ink. From that moment on, their poems stopped testing emotions. They became breath, shared breath. They no longer wrote I and you. They began to write we. They no longer feared saying too much. They began to fear running out of things to say. Their connection had outgrown the page. It pulsed now, with rhythm, with blood, with life. And though they had never seen each other, never heard the other's voice, they knew. They were changing each other, word by word, like a poem with a heartbeat, like a heart that had finally found someone listening. A veil of early winter mist clung to the library's windows, blurring the glass like the feeling inside Olivia, weightless, suspended, both warm and uneasy. The afternoon light had lost its golden hue. It now slanted grey, the colour of empty days without a name. The notebook was there in its usual spot, like a quiet appointment never spoken aloud but never missed. She opened it, the pages unfolding like a familiar ritual. But something was different, a new poem. Not long, but bolder than anything before. And for the first time, he, the nameless, faceless, voiceless presence, had left a suggestion. There's a poetry contest next month, I think. If anyone belongs on that stage, it's you. Not to win, but to let what you've written fly free from the page. Olivia stopped at the last line. Her eyes lingered on the space after the words, as if even the silence held something unspoken. She closed her eyes but found no peace this time. It should have felt like joy. Recognition. A gift. So why was she trembling? That night, Olivia lay in bed, the light off but her phone casting a faint glow. She wasn't texting anyone and just staring at the contest's homepage. Poetry Unbound, your voice deserves to be heard. The word voice made her chest tighten. These years her poetry had been her only voice, and yet she'd never spoken it aloud. Her words lived in quiet, ink on pages, sheltered from glances and judgments. She remembered too clearly the day she'd shown a poem to her high school teacher. Just a few lines. The teacher had read it, nodded once and said, "It's okay." That okay was enough to fold up everything she'd been writing that summer and hide it away. Since then, no one had read her poems, except now, someone had, and they had answered. They had seen her, not the polished parts, but the truth in every uneven line, and they wanted her to step forward. The next day, Olivia returned to the library. She didn't write anything new, just left behind. To her question, if I write down the thing I fear the most, would you still think it's beautiful? She didn't expect an answer right away, but only a few days later, Noah wrote back. And what he left behind silenced her for a long while. I don't read your poems because they're beautiful. I read them because there's something in you that makes even what's not beautiful worth hearing. The words weren't ornate, but they wrapped around an old wound like soft wool, not to cover but to soothe. Olivia began to read her poetry out loud, in her room, alone. At first, her voice faltered. Her timing slipped. There were moments when she had to stop, but slowly she learned to breathe through it, to let the words she once feared take shape in the air, even if no one else heard them. She chose a poem, not her best, but her most honest. A poem written 2 winters ago, when she was sure the world could keep turning without her in it. I once believed I was a stray mark on the canvas people called life, but someone once wrote to me that even a tiny dot can be the end of a sentence. She read it in front of the mirror, and for the first time she didn't cry when she reached the last line. On the contest website, she began filling out the application. Name Olivia Brooke. Age 23, category poetry, spoken word. When she reached the field labeled title of piece, she typed, not just a dot. She stared at those words for a long time, then clicked submit. Her hands shook, but not from the old fear. This was something new. Her tremor of beginning. The first step beyond the page, no longer waiting for someone else to find her. This time, her voice would step out on its own. Not for anyone else, but for herself, and for the one who believed her words were already flying. The morning was clearer than usual, crisp and cool, but to Olivia the air felt heavier, as if every molecule carried the weight of something waiting. She sat before the mirror, a small comb slipping gently through her dark brown hair as it fell across her shoulders. Everything around her was still familiar. The little room lit by slanted window light, pastel prints taped to the wall, the shelf lined with poetry books. and the indigo notebook resting neatly on the desk. But something inside her had shifted. That afternoon she would step onto a stage, for the first time in her life, to read a poem aloud. Not one written to impress, not for an audience, but one that had once saved her. She'd registered. She'd chosen her piece. She'd rehearsed. But none of it made her feel ready. No one knew who she was. She would walk out there under her real name. Olivia Brooke. No more anonymity, no longer the invisible voice behind a notebook. This time she would be seen, and she didn't know how much of that she could bear. She arrived nearly an hour early. The contest was held in a small open theatre. Wooden seats, a black stage, and soft golden lights spilling onto the floor like a hush. From the last row, Olivia looked up at the empty stage. It felt enormous, silent, and full of pressure. She held the notebook tightly. Not because she would read from it, the poem had been printed, memorized, but because it anchored her, kept her heart from slipping. A man in a simple suit approached, tall, calm, kind-eyed. He introduced himself as the event coordinator, handed her a microphone and explained where to stand. His voice was warm, gentle. Still, Olivia could only catch fragments. Inside her head, other voices were louder. Who would want to hear me? First, what if my voice shakes? What if I forget halfway through? When it was her turn, the stage lights flared on. Olivia stepped forward, each step as cautious as walking through fog. The glare blurred the audience's faces. It could have been 100 people, maybe 50. But to her they represented the same thing, the fear of being seen, judged, found. Not enough. She stood there longer than she meant to. The room held its breath. Olivia could hear her heartbeat echo through the microphone. She looked down at the page in her hand. Then, instead of reading, she took one deep, steady breath and began. Her voice was small, but clear. I once believed I was a stray mark on the canvas people called life. But someone once wrote to me that even a tiny dot can be the end of a sentence. Her voice trembled at first. But no one laughed. No one turned away. There were no coughs, no whispers, and somehow that stillness held her, made space for her. She kept going. I once feared I wasn't enough. Not enough good, not enough right, not enough for anyone to need. But every day, I wrote, and word by word I gathered myself, quietly, completely. By the final line, her voice no longer shook. If poetry is a voice, then today I have finally spoken. A pause, then applause, not thunderous, but true. Gentle, almost reverent. Olivia bowed her head and stepped off stage. Behind the curtain the tears came, but not from fear, from release. In the third row a man had sat motionless through her entire reading, eyes fixed on the stage, never wavering. Noah knew from the very first line. It was her. The writer. The girl who had lived behind the words and now had stepped out from the page. He didn't rise, didn't wave, but his eyes were alight, as if the poem she had just spoken was for him too. She didn't see him, but that didn't matter. She had read, she had spoken, and from that moment on she would never again be invisible. When Olivia stepped out of the auditorium, she carried a feeling she had never known before. She was no longer the hidden writer. She was a voice, and finally, she had used it. The stage lights draped over Olivia like a winter blanket, warm, soft, and still. She stood there, no longer the girl hidden behind the library shelves, no longer a shadow slipping through school hallways, no longer writing only for herself. Today she was the one telling the story, and the story was her own. She drew in a breath. The microphone no longer felt cold in her hand. The silence from the crowd no longer threatened. It had become a quiet room she could step into, like walking into a softly lit space where someone had left the light on, just in case she came. She lifted her gaze, not searching for faces, not seeking anyone in particular, but looking beyond them, toward a place she couldn't name. A place where she hoped he might be. The one who had first written in the notebook. The one who, without ever asking, gave her permission to exist without fear. Then she began, not loud, not perfectly clear, but steady. Her voice carried weight, not from force, but from truth. I don't know your face, never heard your voice, only read a few lines that made me believe. I am not invisible. She paused, looked down, then up again. When you wrote to me, I trembled, but I started writing again, not just to survive, but to be seen. A few people in the audience leaned forward. Some faces were wet with quiet tears, but Olivia wasn't watching. Them. She was speaking to one person only. I've never dared to love, but if love means trust, then maybe I have loved you, since the moment someone said, if you're still writing, please don't stop. She held the old indigo notebook in one hand, still tight, as if it were a bridge between all the quiet days that had brought her to this bold one. So this poem isn't to win, it's to tell you, you're not writing alone anymore. Breeze slipped through the crack in the auditorium door, lifting the corner of a curtain. On stage, Olivia stood taller than she ever had. Her eyes were misted, but she did not look down. She was watching, waiting, hoping. There was no applause at first, only stillness, like someone was holding their breath so the moment wouldn't break. Then from a far corner, a single clap, soft, hesitant, and slowly more joined in, like rain beginning to tap gently on an old rooftop. Olivia smiled. She didn't bow yet. She let herself stand in that space a moment longer, just long enough for her heart to say, I did it. From the third row, Noah never looked away. He had known the moment she spoke her first line. He didn't need confirmation. He didn't need a name. Every word was a signal. Every syllable. An answer he never expected to hear out loud. He didn't rise and he didn't walk to her. Not yet, but in his chest something opened wide, a quiet knowing they had found each other. Not through glances, not through touch, but through the thin line of ink across the stillest days. As Olivia stepped off stage and slipped, behind the curtain she felt lighter than air, as if she were floating. No one waited there, no one wrapped her in a hug, and yet she didn't feel alone, because for the first time she was no longer writing just to be seen. She was writing to say, I see you, and today she had said it out loud. The stage lights had dimmed, seats slowly emptied, footsteps echoing as scattered reverberations against the theater's bare walls. Olivia sat alone in the very last row, her hands cradling the small notebook in her lap. She had just finished, a long journey, not measured in time but in heartbeats, and her heart even now was still beating, not from fear anymore, but from something quieter, waiting. She didn't know if he was there. She didn't know if he'd heard her. Poem, but she had written it for him, and she had spoken it out loud. That she could offer. The rest, she let go like a poem released from the hands that wrote it. Outside, the night air was gentle, the city lights casting soft golden pools onto the stone path. She stepped out of the hall, the breeze threading through her hair, stirring lines of memory that had yet to settle, and then, from the other side of the steps, a voice, not loud, not calling her name, just enough to make her stop. You write beautifully. She turned. A young man stood beneath a tree, half of his face caught in the warm glow of a lamppost. Simple shirt. Steady hands. Holding something. A notebook. She didn't answer, just walked slowly toward him. Each step felt like crossing a page, one they had written together, line by line, without ever meeting. He held the notebook out, smiling softly, careful not to disturb the quiet that had settled around them. I was there every Tuesday. Olivia looked down at the notebook in his hand. She didn't need to check. She knew it was hers, but tonight it wasn't a hiding place. It was a bridge, and the person on the other side had finally stepped across. She smiled, not shy, not uncertain. A smile like a gentle closing line to a long, silent chapter. Noah. He nodded. And you're Olivia, aren't you? She nodded too. Their eyes met in a silence that felt like the last two lines of a long poem. Nothing more needed, nothing missing. They stood there, no hug, no fanfare, just presence. As if the story they'd once told in ink had taken form and was now standing, breathing between them. Then Noah pulled a small paper from his pocket, held it out to her. "The first poem you left after I replied, I copied it. It's still the one I remember best." Her hands trembled slightly as she took it, not from cold, but from something like a soft tide rising inside her. She read, "I don't know who you are, but if you saw yourself in my words, then maybe you've sat here too and felt the wind drift past just like I do now." She looked up at him, eyes rimmed red and but luminous. "I never thought a poem could take me this far." Noah smiled. "And you don't know how close it brought me." They didn't promise anything. They didn't speak of the future, but they walked away together. Leaves rustled along the edge of the path, like the soft turning of pages, not to close a story, but to begin a new one, because they had recognized each other, not through glances, not through touch, but through lines of poetry that had once spoken when their hearts could not. This wasn't just a story of poems anymore. It was a story of two people, once lonely, once hidden, who had finally said what needed saying, in their own quiet, unshakable way. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end, the place where even the quietest words can connect two distant hearts. If you've ever felt small or not quite enough, remember this. Sometimes, all it takes is one person listening for your words to change the shape of someone's world. If this story touched you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so we can keep spreading more kindness, softness, and healing, one story at a time. You are never alone, and your words are always worth hearing.